And we bow. Hello and good morning. It's nice to see a few folks here as well as people who I know are there virtually. It's a nice, blustery Sunday morning here in West Michigan. For those who don't know yet, my given name is Caleb, but my Dharma name is Tongjin Su. You can follow along with us this morning in the Rituals and Practices booklet, which can be found in the. I think there's a link that should be put into the Zoom room right now, so you can click onto that and follow along. But we start every service by reciting our Refuge vows, and those are on page 7 of the ritual booklet. I go for refuge to Buddha, my deeply awakened mind, the living source of understanding and compassion, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to Dharma, the path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy, and enlightenment, the way of peace, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation, which must be cultivated to be known fully. I am aware that the three jewels are within my heart. I vow to realize them. I vow to understand living beings and their suffering. I vow to cultivate loving kindness and compassion and to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to live simply and sanely, content with few possessions, and to keep my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worry and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly so that understanding and compassion will flower, and I can help living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. And we bow. Okay, if you turn in your booklet to page 8, we will recite the Heart Sutra next, and we recite the title of it at the beginning and at the end. The Mahaprajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. The Bodhisattva of great compassion from the deep practice of prajna paramita perceived the emptiness of all 5 skandhas and delivered all beings from their suffering. O Shariputra, form is no other than emptiness, emptiness no other than form. Form is emptiness, emptiness form. The same is true of feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness. O Shariputra, all dharmas are empty. They are not born nor annihilated. They are not defiled nor immaculate. They do not increase nor decrease. So in emptiness, no form, no feeling, no thought, no impulse, no consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or objects of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of consciousness, no ignorance, nor extinction of ignorance, no old age and death, nor extinction of them, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cease from suffering, no path to lead out of suffering, no knowledge, no attainment, no realization, for there is nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva holds on to nothing but prajna paramita. Therefore, the mind is clear of any delusive hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Away from all perverted views, one reaches final nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future, through faith in prajna paramita, attain to the highest perfect enlightenment. Know then the prajna paramita is the great Dharani, the radiant peerless mantram, the utmost supreme mantram, which is capable of allaying all pain. This is true beyond all doubt. Proclaim now the highest wisdom, the prajna paramita. Gate, gate, para, gate, parasam, gate, bodhisvaha. Gate, gate, para, gate, parasam, gate, bodhisvaha. Gate, gate, para, gate, parasam, gate, bodhisvaha. The Maha Prajna Paramita Hridaya Sutra. I'm really looking forward to the day we reopen because my favorite part about reciting that sutra was the moment when at the end we'd recite the mantra and my voice would be lost amongst everybody else's. I wouldn't be able to pick out my own individual voice. I could just hear, yeah, everyone else's. But until that day, here we are. So, to start the Dharma talk today, I want to share a verse from the Dhammapada. It's verse 236, if you want to look it up. It goes like this. Your life has come to an end, and you are in the presence of death. There's no place to rest on this journey, and you are so unprepared. Light the lamp within, strive hard to attain wisdom. Become pure and innocent, and you will be free from birth and death. So, in preparing this Dharma talk today, I wanted to keep in line with the themes kind of already established by Su with her wonderful talk on Halloween or Samhain about hungry ghosts and the Ulambana Sutra, as well as Hung Su's recent talk last Sunday on the Buddha's parinirvana. So, and sort of as a means of honoring this season of the growing cold and the growing darkness. So I want to talk about a subject that I recognize is quite solemn. It's a grave subject, and I want to talk about death. But I want to recognize at the forefront of this talk that it's not to be a downer or to I'm not trying to bring anyone down by bringing up something so serious or just purely delve into something depressing. The goal is to explore what Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, how his whole spiritual quest in part arose from him trying to confront the problem of death. So today I want to talk about what's called the four sights, the four things that Siddhartha saw when he left the palace, as well as the five remembrances, which is something that Siddhartha offered in his sermons after enlightenment. So let's get started, I suppose. So, although we think of death as the end, in a way, it was actually the beginning of Buddhism because it was Shakyamuni Buddha's entry point to the path. And I think for many of us, such as myself, it was our entry point too. So, I want to recount for you the story of the four sights. Growing up, Prince Siddhartha Gautama was born to an aristocratic family of warrior kings. In India, there were many classes of people, and the Buddha was born to the Kshatriyas, which are a class of warriors that ruled over others. So they lived in a lavish palace, and Siddhartha's father's name was Suddhodana, and he was a king who ruled over a whole clan, and his mother, her name was Queen Maya. Unfortunately, she passed only a couple days after giving birth to him, and Siddhartha was then raised by his mother's sister. And at his birth, a holy man foretold that Siddhartha would become either a world conquering king if he stayed at home, or he would become a great spiritual teacher if he were to ever leave home and see the suffering of the world. Because he wanted his son to inherit his own role, Suddhodana did everything in his power to shield his son from sickness and death and decay. And instead, every pleasurable thing was afforded to Siddhartha. Delights of food, women, music, and flowers were paraded before him daily. And Siddhartha enjoyed these things for a long time, for most of his life. Well, not most of his life, but up until, throughout his adolescence and even into adulthood. But eventually he desired to go beyond the walls of the palace, beyond the walls of his garden, and to go see the world outside. So one day, Siddhartha asked his charioteer, Chana, to ride out with him from the palace and take him on a journey. And along this journey, he saw what we now call the four sights. So first, the two saw an aged man who was hobbling along on his cane. And Siddhartha said to Chana, "What is wrong with this man? Why does he look so strange and weakened?" To which Chana explained that the man was old and that all beings experience aging and its effects. Next, the pair kept riding and they saw a person suffering from a disease. Maybe he was coughing or sneezing or running a fever. We don't really know. The legends don't say. We just know that he was visibly unwell. So much so that Siddhartha asked Chana about this person too. So Chana explained that the person was sick and that sickness is something all beings undergo. Thirdly, the two of them saw a dead body. If you've ever been to India, you know that pretty much everything takes place out in the open there. It's not unusual to see a dead body being cremated or on its way to cremation. But Siddhartha was horrified at the sight. He'd gone his whole life without experiencing death, besides the death of his mother, but he was too young to really understand it at the time. He'd never seen a dead body, and he didn't even know that people died. So Chana again explained that death is an inescapable fact of life, an event from which no one can return. The Prince Siddhartha felt sick to his stomach, and he was horrified. In a short time, his whole world changed as he learned that all living beings must undergo aging and sickness and death throughout their lifetime. So those are the first three of the four sights. And confronted by this fact of entropy, Siddhartha experienced what is called samvega in Pali. The term means dismay, agitation, fear, or anxiety. But most importantly, it has a connotation of meaning a religious emotion caused by contemplation of the miseries of the world. So you see, Siddhartha realized not just that all beings will die, but at that moment, he realized that he would die, something that he hadn't contemplated or realized until that point. And Thanissaro bhikkhu describes this state of mind as the oppressive sense of shock, dismay, and alienation that comes with realizing the futility and meaninglessness of life as it's normally lived, a chastening sense of our own complacency and foolishness in having let ourselves live so blindly, and an anxious sense of urgency in trying to find a way out of this meaningless cycle. This was the starting point of Siddhartha's spiritual life. And for many others, I think it's the beginning of theirs too. What do you do when confronting this fact, right? And at that moment, Siddhartha was almost like a child because he'd spent his whole life in the palace and hadn't realized this. And he was coming to what is called in modern psychology death consciousness. Usually, we first encounter death through the death of others, and it usually occurs in childhood. Sometimes it's a family member, or maybe it's a pet. And I think it's a weird experience for a child, versus like the pastels and toys of a playroom. People say really weird things like the person's not coming back, or they're on the other side, or in a better place now. And this event in a child's life unfolds a process of death consciousness, which has three steps of ever increasing understanding: irreversibility, non functionality, and universality. So irreversibility just means it's not reversible, right? It's the first understanding of death, and it's the realization of death's finality. The deceased is not on a vacation or a trip that they can return from. The second aspect is non functionality. People who have passed cannot breathe, they cannot reply when spoken to, or smile, hold hands, or cook food. And once a child processes these two aspects, they realize that death is a phenomenon that happens, but they do not think it happens to everybody. They tend to think that certain people are immune, usually people immediate to them, like their parents or their siblings. But this magical thinking is gone once they process the universality of death, the fact that everything from plants to animals, the sun, and even themselves will one day perish. This is the final, most devastating blow that completes a person's death consciousness. And Siddhartha went through all three of these steps in one afternoon as a young adult. So think how profound a shock this must have been to Siddhartha's worldview. He'd been stuck inside of a palace knowing nothing but um, the heights of sensual pleasure. So after seeing the dead body from the seat of his chariot, Siddhartha realized, I will die, and so will everything else. And that that was the third of the four sights. So I think importantly, we see what happened when he saw the fourth, right? After those first three sights that awakened Siddhartha to impermanence, he saw one more, which was a religious ascetic meditating beneath a tree, a man devoted to finding the cause of human suffering. To Siddhartha, this last sight showed him the way forward. He felt hopeful. He thought, if I could practice asceticism too, perhaps I can learn the cause of human suffering and cease the suffering that arises from the endless rounds of birth, death, and decay. So the next day, Siddhartha cut his hair and he left his father's palace, leaving his weapons, his title, his comforts, and even his wife and newly born son. We see how samvega, this religious emotion that was stirred up by nausea with samsara, is the beginning of Siddhartha's spiritual path. It provided the fuel for his quest. It is what drove him as he traveled around India, training under various ascetics, mendicant monks, attempting to resolve the question of human suffering. Why does this happen to us, and what can we do about it? So, in this way, I see that samvega is fuel for one of our virtues, virya paramita. For those who don't know, in Mahayana Buddhism, there are 6 paramitas. You can think of them as 6 virtues to cultivate on the path. And often, virya paramita is translated as enthusiasm, vigor, and strenuousness. You could think of Virya Paramita as the virtue of developing oneself spiritually so that one can help both themselves and others. It's the fuel that drives us to get up every morning and meditate. The virtue of discipline to some degree. The perfection of effort, a relentless drive directed at one goal, the realization of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. In the way of the Bodhisattva, Shantideva describes it like this: thus, with patience, I will bravely persevere. Through zeal it is that I shall reach enlightenment. If no wind blows, then nothing stirs, and neither is there merit without perseverance. This talk came out of this time last year when a friend of mine passed away, and it was unexpected because I had made plans to go out and see him in December, but then my partner became pregnant, and our plans shifted, and we moved back to Michigan rather than going to visit him in California. He and I spent a lot of time together in our teenage years. We worked out a lot together. We both played the drums, so we enjoyed playing music together. And when he passed, I spent a lot of time grieving him and kind of spent some time regretting that I could have done something differently, right? I could have reached out more. I could have spoken to him more often. But once kind of those thoughts passed, it served actually as a potent reminder that it reminded me, kind of cut through some of my complacency and reminded me that my time here is short and that I can't take anything for granted and that nothing in my life is guaranteed. It reminded me of a sense of urgency that my practice demands of me. It reminded me of the classic injunction to practice as if my hair is on fire. And while perusing our old rituals and practices booklet, I found something called the morning dedication that I think underscores this sense of urgency. It says, I have wasted enough time. Why waste any more time? Today I will do something constructive and beneficial with my time instead of squandering it on meaningless activities. My life could have easily been different. I might have died in infancy, be suffering grinding poverty, or be experiencing any of the things that are anathema to pursuing a life of love, kindness, and compassion. I am truly fortunate indeed. If even mountains are subject to change and dissolution, how much more so is my body, which is sometimes susceptible to disease, breakdown, the elements, accidents, and all kinds of harm. I must utilize the opportunities of today before the chance is lost forever. So it's great to have that urgency, that recollection, but it's very difficult, I find, to sustain this recollection, to remember that we will die and allow it to inform our actions on a day-to-day basis. We don't receive a lot of support from our culture to sustain this remembrance in our consciousness. Honestly, in a way, Western pop culture is a massive edifice to prop up the denial of death. We celebrate youthfulness and vitality. We use anti aging creams, dread our birthdays after age 21, and we don't care very often for our elderly in our own homes as we once did. Generally, we put them in nursing homes and don't have contact with people who are in their latter years. The philosopher Simon Critchley observed that Western culture today is anti Victorian. So the Victorians were famously prudish about sex, but fascinated by death, right? Instead, we're very open about sex, but very hesitant to discuss death. It's kind of a taboo conversational topic. But things weren't always this way. In medieval Europe, a particular trope abounded in art, the memento mori. That's a Latin phrase meaning remember that you will die. Whether symbolized by skulls or wilting flowers, an hourglass or a dancing grim reaper carrying off both the rich and the poor alike, the memento mori served one purpose: to remind one that life is short and that our time here is precious. In Europe, they served to remind Christians of the judgment waiting for them after death and the destination of one's soul, right? But I would suggest we Western Mahayana Buddhists need something similar, although it's not motivated toward figuring out whether you're headed toward heaven and hell. The Dharma traditions are rich and vibrant, and within it we can find various upaya or skillful means for working with death to cultivate samvega and virya paramita in turn. For instance, in Japan, many Zen monks write a final haiku in the months leading up to their passing. In Tibet, there are certain traditions that use skulls and thigh bones as musical instruments and ritual objects. And historically, many traditions of Buddhists throughout time have practiced meditation in charnel grounds. Although they are uncommon in America and Europe, these places abound in northern India, Bhutan, Tibet, and other countries in Asia. A charnel ground is an above ground area where human bodies are left to decompose in the open, and everything lies open to the air: the bones, the skin, the flesh, the guts. Carrion animals pick at these corpses, and nothing is concealed. Our ancestors of practice would enter these places of decay and they would meditate to really comprehend impermanence in a visceral way. We know this practice formed an important part of the tradition from the very beginning. In the Satipatthana Sutta, Shakyamuni Buddha offers the Satipatthana Sutta is really the Buddha's Siddhartha Gautama's instructions on meditation, and he provides many different forms of contemplations that we can use. And at least 10 of these are different cemetery contemplations. For instance, he says, "And further, monks, if a monk sees a body thrown in a charnel ground, being eaten by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, or by worms, he then applies this perception to his own body thus: Verily, also my own body is of the same nature, such will it become, and will not escape it." All these different contemplations end with the same line, which is, "This body of mine also has this nature, has this destiny, and cannot escape it." And I think the point that Siddhartha was suggesting was to see the decay of another body and understand that the same will happen to oneself. And even if we today cannot go to such places, we have other tools available to us too, on our cushion and in our zazen. Into the wide and spacious mind cultivated in our sitting practice, we can invite in death. We can invite in a contemplation of impermanence, consciously and compassionately. It can be as detailed or as loose as we discern is appropriate. It can be medical, like contemplating the stopping of one's heart or the final exhale of one's lungs, or it can be figurative, like the imagining of the skin loosely falling from one's body. But the point remains that we apply the perception of death, directing at our own body, so that we know in our bones our own impermanence and how precious this opportunity to have a human body really is. In the Upajjhatthana Sutta, there's a piece of wisdom from the Buddha called the Five Remembrances. And the Buddha described them as, quote, "the 5 facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained." And I think beyond that, we could say whether one is a woman, a man, or someone who identifies as neither. In some traditions, monks and lay people will recite these every day. So we will read them together today and allow ourselves a couple minutes between each one to sit with them. So prepare yourselves for meditation. I am sure to become old. I cannot avoid aging. I am sure to become ill. I cannot avoid illness. I am sure to die. I cannot avoid death. I must be separated and parted from all that is dear and beloved to me. I am the owner of my actions, the heir of my actions. Actions are the womb from which I have sprung. Actions are my relations. Actions are my protection. Whatever actions I do, good or bad, of these I shall become the heir. Thank you. Thank you for exploring a grim topic with me. I think the five remembrances, especially the first four, are quite grim, but the fifth holds the medicine in that bitter pill. Like, what is the fruit or the result of this practice? And I think it is a clarified importance of what we do each and every day in each and every moment, and a remembrance of just how precious life is, how fragile each moment is, and how important it is to tell people we love them, tell people we're grateful for them, and express how much we care. Um, Thank you. So I think it's at this time that we'll take some announcements. Unless, did we want to take comments, questions, consternations? I mean, I'd be open to that if anyone has any comments or questions, consternations, criticisms, or snide remarks. I guess at this time, if you wanted to drop anything along those lines into the chat boxes, either on Zoom or on YouTube. Now, no, we're all good. Okay, fine by me. Cool. I'm not sure who's doing it. Would one of you be comfortable coming up to give an announcement? Thank you, Gail.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Pardon me, Gail from Fundraising Committee. 3 very brief announcements. First one is, since the Sangha is not open to the public, the Fundraising Committee wanted once a month to give the Sangha a very brief idea of where we stood financially, i.e. whether we're able to meet our expenses. And as Ambo said in one of the previous announcements, we were very fortunate in September to meet our announcements plus $1. For that, we're very grateful. Unfortunately, in October, we weren't, take one step. Okay, unfortunately, in October, we weren't able to meet our expenses. And we wanted just to extend our great appreciation for the generosity of the Sangha during this time that we're not open. Second, the ways that you can donate, we've talked about them before very briefly: PayPal, Amazon Smile. Those links are on the newsletter, are below the YouTube video, and are on the website. And there's a bit of a revision to Amazon Smile, so I'd ask that you go to this week's newsletter that addresses that. And finally, Drew Nelson, who is a Sangha member who owns Honey Creek Woodworkers, and I asked his permission if I could tell you that, has generously made 6 meditation benches. They're walnut. They're $60. For those of you who want Christmas presents or just want a very nicely done meditation bench. The information for ordering, I have 6 of them. The information for ordering and a picture will be on the newsletter, so look for that. Notice that they have, they can rock back and forth. They're really comfortable. I can attest to this personally. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gail. What neat benches too. Handmade, right? Handmade. Wow. All right. To wrap up, we will recite our 3 closing gathas together. I'll just skip the bells. We'll just say them together. All right. For all unskillful action ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thoughts, now I atone for them all. Vast is the robe of compassion, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Buddhist teachings for the benefit of all sentient beings. All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Endless blind passions, I vow to uproot. Dharma gates be without number, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to attain. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. If you care to join us afterward for our tea time, our virtual tea, then we will see you there for some short discussion and socializing. Thank you.